I just realized that in some of the world building interviews that I've done for this channel, the term world building disease comes up several times, and yet I've not really explained what I mean by this. So in today's video, I'll share my definition with you and also talk about how to avoid it. Let's get into it. Hi guys, my name is Jesper and welcome to the Fame of Fantasy. This channel is all about giving you inspiration to master your craft and create fantasy that will truly immerse your audience. Perhaps we should begin with a definition. What is world builder's disease, or as some call it, Storyworld builder's disease? Well, it's a term used for those who keep developing a world without ever getting to the stage where they put an adventure or story into that setting. It's the creation of backstory that goes far beyond the interest of your average audience. As with so many things in fantasy, we probably have Tolkien to thank for this, at least in part. He kept building his Middle-earth setting for decades and was wildly successful in doing so. So I imagine that this is what has led many of us to think that we probably need to do the same. Now keep in mind that world building and setting has a big role to play in what drove us to fantasy or to the fantasy genre in the first place. So it's really not hard to understand why we overload on it and let it take attention away from plot and characterization. However, I will claim that where the setting might be what makes us begin a story, it's the plot and the characters that makes us finish it. You see how we are somehow facing an innate conflict when it comes to world building here? And hey, if you recognize yourself in any of the stuff that I'll share in today's video, then don't worry about it. You know, I have suffered from world building disease myself, so you're not alone. It's just so much fun creating a new world, and it can really suck you in. You can get lost there for a long time, just building and building more and more details into your setting, obsessing over writing pages upon pages about every culture in the setting, maps of every city, a vocabulary of words for every nation, and on and on. Again, I've been there. So I'm not going to say if it's a problem to suffer from world building disease or not, because I really believe that it does depend on the context. You know, if you are a hobby world builder who just love to delve into the details and you're only creating this entire setting for your own pleasure and benefit, then there's absolutely no problem. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you are a writer like me, or if you have a gaming group waiting for your creation to be complete or something like that, then it is important not to get stuck in the mud of world building. What is important to realize is that world building can end up being a procrastination tool where the whole process feeds on itself. So because if you're world building, you don't have to write, and you don't have to develop adventures, right? You see how that works? It's all the fun with none of the work when the creator becomes more and more obsessed with every single detail of the world. This way you will never get to writing or adventure creation. While Lord of the Rings certainly benefited from the amount of world building that Tolkien did, one also have to ask how many works of fiction he could have produced if he had focused more on writing than spending more than a decade on world building. Again, I'm not judging right or wrong here. I'm just saying that If other people are dependent on your output, it's a question worth asking. So that's all well and good, but how do you know if you are suffering from world-building disease or not? And is there a cure? Well, the first symptom is quite obvious. It's that of neglect, meaning it shows as a neglect of writing the story or the adventure for that matter, in favor of creating vast histories for the setting. Another symptom is that of info dumping. This is where you are summarizing lots and lots of background information, usually in the beginning of a book or an adventure, which is the worst place possible to do this, as it becomes an obstacle between the story and the audience. It's much better to sprinkle it in carefully over time as and when it becomes relevant. And lastly is obsessing with irrelevant facts. Just because it sits in a world-building notebook doesn't mean that the audience will care. So don't cram it in there. Let's look into how we can cure ourselves if world-building disease is a problem you are facing. But I'm also starting to think about the question of the week here, because I want to hear if you think that world-building disease is something to worry about or not. It could also be very interesting with some examples of where you have noticed it happening to yourself. So do let me know in the comment section below. A cure for world-building disease? Well, it's pretty simple, isn't it? Avoid the temptation of creating yet another faction and instead focus on the plot and the characters. Put your world aside for a while and focus on the story instead. Easier said than done? Yeah, perhaps. But going cold turkey is the only option if world-building disease has caught you too badly. I have a few additional reflections to share on this entire topic, but before going there, I want to mention Patreon. There is a link in the description field below, so you can go and check it out if you want. And I hope you will join the community over on Patreon and help this channel keep going. And also, if you do like today's video, please hit the like button below as well and share it with a friend. I know there was a lot of words on what to be careful with when world building, but don't get me wrong. Taking the time to brainstorm your world is important and it is valuable. It does make it easier for you to create your story and make the setting feel more authentic to your audience. A good idea is to create a list of necessary world building areas that you need to know for your plot, and then flesh those out. Once that is in place, then stop and focus on plotting and characters instead. If you then figure out that you need more, then just go back and do some more world building. Just do it as and when necessary instead of all the time. With focus purely on world building instead of creation, you might be able to explain all the religious structures of your setting and why this or that monster came into existence, but no one will ever get to experience it because it all sits in your notebook. That is also why I always urge you to subscribe to this channel in order to learn how to master your craft of creating immersing fantasy worlds, setting and characters. Even the best fantasy worlds, the most memorable ones, does not require a 100-page compendium of required reading for beginners. In writing, I have edited the first few chapters of Book 3 in the Keystone Bone Trilogy by now, and I must admit that it's a lot of work, but as I have said in other videos, I quite enjoy this part of the process. Getting work on the second edition of my fantasy map making book done in parallel is a real struggle though. I have it on my to-do list every day, and I'm happy if I just get a little done, but lately it has been difficult on most days. I admit that this is quite annoying because I really want to get it done as fast as possible, but priority is on book 3 at the moment. There are readers out there waiting for the ending of the trilogy, so that is the most important thing for me to focus on at this point in time. If you haven't jumped into the Keystone Bone trilogy yet, you can go to my website and find it there. I placed information on the screen here. Book 1 and Book 2 is out for your enjoyment. Anyway, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.